Good morning everyone. My name is Sumanpreet Kaur and today I'm going to discuss a case of Fairstone Financial Holdings Inc. versus Jew Bank of Canada. This case was held by Ontario Superior Court of Justice. If I talk about the case background, this case arose from the commercial dispute between Fairstone Financial Holdings Inc., a financial service provider, and the Jew Bank of Canada, a Canadian financial institution. The disagreement revolved around the validity and enforceability of an agreement that governed the transfer of customer contracts and obligations between two parties. Fairstone and Due Bank had entered into the contractual agreement concerning the assignment and the transfer of financial services agreement related to the consumer credit products. The key issue was whether the Fairstone could enforce certain contract obligations against Due Bank, particularly regarding the handling of the transferred consumers' obligation. Fairstone sought out the declaratory judgment for the court and finds that the agreement was valid and the Due Bank was legally required to comply with its terms even though some clauses in the contract were subject to interpretation. At the core of dispute were the contract ambitious and the differences in interpretations of the agreement provisions, especially in relation to the scope and the nature of the transfer obligation. Fairstone argued that the Due Bank have a clear responsibility to honor the agreed upon the terms, while the Due Bank questions the enforceability of the specific contract provision. If I go ahead with the interpretation of the contract, the court had to determine whether the terms of the agreement between Fairstone and Due Bank were clear and unambiguous. The primary focus was on the causes related to the transfer of customer obligation, as the Due Bank was questioned whether these causes were enforceable in their current form. In the contract contained vague on the ambiguous language, the court needed to assess the intent of the parties at the time of signing the agreement. The commercial dispute between Canadian Bank and the Due Bank of the Canada and the financial services firm Fairstone Financial Holdings Inc. brought around this case. The conflict was over the enforceability and legality of the contract. The government, the two parties' transfer of the customer content and obligation. The contract for the assignment and the transfer of financial services agreement covered the consumer credit product has been signed between Due Bank and Fairstone. This issue was whether the Fairstone was entitled to hold Due Bank or come the certain contract obligations, especially those of kind of covered and serving of the transfer customer obligation. Fairstone asked for the declaratory order from the court confirming the validity of agreement and the Due Bank willingness to ahead of this item despite some sessions, contractual uncertainty, and the difficulties in the interpretation of the agreement provision. More specifically, the extent and the nature of obligation transferred lay at the heart of dispute. Fairstone claimed that Due Bank had unmistakable obligations to uphold the condition of the agreement, while Due Bank contended to enforceability of certain of the contractual provisions. If I talk about the key issue behind this case is the court had to decide whether the Fairstone and the Due Bank contract was in the plain and express condition. The terms on the consumer's obligation transfer were the core of this issue. Due Bank objected to whether they could be enforced under their current terms or not. The court had to determine the intention of the parties and the signing of the contract.
Hello everyone, my name is Harpreet and now I will explain the rest of the two key issues. The first key issue is broken agreement. Fairstone believes that Due Bank didn't keep its promises and they have to complete its promises. So because they have responsibilities and they have a one additional responsibility, that is financial responsibility. And the second key issue is clearing up confusion, and because they want to know that everyone is on the same page and also clearing up the understanding and mistakes. And they also want to know that the due bank have to complete its responsibilities and promises that in the past they are agreed to complete that. The decisions in the favor of Fairstone. The first decision is the contract is valid and accurate. The second decision is due bank give the accurate and equal responsibilities to all. And the last decision is Fairstone is have a right to hold due bank accountable for meeting its commitments.
Now I will explain about the impact in which the need for clear and concise wording in contracts, especially when the rights and responsibilities are being transferred from one party to another. If terms that the contract are clear, faithfully express the intent of the parties, the court will enforce them. And now I will explain the background of the next case, that is Kanitz v. Rogers Cable, in which it concerned a class action on the behalf of the Rogers Cable consumer represented by the Roger Kanitz. And then they claim Rogers Cable were advertising their internet and cable services in a way that were untrue, because as they argued, Rogers mispresented the value and the functionality of the services provided. Consumer were led to believe that the services included high speed were actually being provided when in fact they were not. As a result, consumers were left with the impression that they receive a higher level of the services than they actually being delivered.
Good morning, Professor. My name is Simranjit Kaur. Now I am going to discuss the next topic, and that is key issues in the case against Rogers Cable. First, class action certification. Perhaps the most significant issue in the entire case concerns the right of the plaintiffs, the consumers who commenced a lawsuit against Rogers Cable, to proceed with their case as a class action, which in words of the learned judge is a collective lawsuit for a number of complaints involving multiple parties against a common party as opposed to individual lawsuits. The court would also have to clarify the class action if he met the qualifications that a certain threshold number of individuals needed to be harmed with the same issue. There were common questions of the law or the fact that arose in their claims. A class action needed to be better means for the resolving this controversy. Now this is the issue. The court had to decide whether it was possible to merge the lawsuits for all of the Rogers victims in the same lawsuit, or whether they would all have to sue separately. And moving further, I'm going to discuss next topic, and that is the misrepresentation and violations of the consumer protection law. In fact, the plaintiffs wanted to lack on the Rogers Cable did not provide false or misleading statements in the journal about its service alongside these contracts and prices. Especially the plaintiffs claim the following: Rogers hit its contract provisions, possibly even they were altered based on the observable deceit and the misrepresentations of the Rogers as to what changes could actually occur. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Simran from 13T. As my other team members have discussed about key issues of this topic and background and misrepresentation also, so I'm going to impart the information about the consumer protection and the seasons. First of all, I will talk about consumer protection. The plaintiffs contended that Rogers breached consumer protection regulations by providing insufficient and misleading information about its services. Consumer protection laws ensure transparency, preventing deceptive practices that mislead customers. Lack of clear disclosures can lead to uninformed decisions and financial harm. This case emphasized companies' obligation to communication honestly. Misleading claims or hidden fees erode consumer trust. Deceptive representations of contract terms and pricing violate consumer protection laws designed to prevent unfair business practices and ensure equitable treatment in this market. So now we will move towards decisions. The Ontario Superior Court allowed the class action, concluding that plaintiffs' claims could be collectively addressed. The court found common issues regarding alleged misrepresentation, justifying a class action. Instead of separate cases, shared claims were examined or consistency. The ruling outlined class action methodology, assessing whether a case is made like a clarification certification criteria, including common issues among plaintiffs, and courts ensure claims are sufficiently similar before clarification, validating the need for collective legal proceeding or not. Thank you.
Good morning to all. Myself Muskan Verma. I am here to tell you the impact of the cases. This case has a significant impact on the Canadian class action law, and it also played an important role in the field of the consumer protection. This case showed up a clear parameters what is acceptable or not. Along with that, it showed a real formed principle that if a company has a large-scale deceptive practice, it is held by the accountable by mechanism of the class action law. Along with that, it also helped the companies to be honest for the consumers. If they do not provide the accurate information to their consumer, they have full right to sue them and provide legal consequences, and they have the legal consequences to face in the future. Along with that, it also helped the company to be honest and transparent for the consumer and being full responsible for the consumers who are using their products. Moreover, they also set a legal precedent for the enforcement of the contract as well as the consumer protection. They also guide the court to take the decision whether the group of consumer are acceptable as a lawsuit in the court or not as a group. This case will also give shape to the Canadian court to handle the actions in future. The judge will decide whether the suit have a common legal issues, whether they can best way to resolving the problem, and they also have the legal necessary test. In the scheme, they also help the companies to begin the honest for the consumers, and it also beneficial for the consumers to face the to have a full right to take the action against the company which is not providing them accurate information. So this is the impact of these cases. Thank you so much.